welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we teach you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today we have a special dish. It's a Canadian favorite, particularly from the East Coast. It's called Blueberry Grunt. And this dish was requested by friends of mine, Marilyn and Peter Scott. And according to them, this is something that they would traditionally have as dessert for their holiday meal. Not just the pumpkin pie and the apple pie like the rest of us are going to have, but they've got this extra special treat in the East Coast. Now, blueberry grunt can be made with any kind of berries, not just blueberries, but it's usually made with blueberries. Blueberries are very special to Canadians, and I don't know how many of you know this, but 61% of all of the fruit produced in Canada is blueberries. So that's more than the apples and the peaches and the strawberries and the pears and the cherries. Everything else put together, there's more of these tiny little berries produced than all of those put together. These particular ones are a little bit larger size. They're the cultivated berries, also known as the high bush berries. And there's also the low bush berries, which you'll see in the stores as listed as wild blueberries. And those are much smaller sized. Either one, they all taste the same. They're just different varieties of the same type of fruit. So what we're going to do, the reason it's called blueberry grunt is because of the noise that this makes while it's cooking. It does kind of make this little burbly grunting kind of noise. What it is, it's essentially a stovetop cobbler, which means that we've got the fruit on the bottom and then we have a biscuit type dumpling that goes on the top. The dumplings, in this case, they call them doughboys, but they're a very soft, sweet dumpling. Okay, so we're going to start off by going over our ingredients for today, and then we'll get ready to start cooking. This is actually something that is quite quick to make. And it's also something that is probably simple enough and goofy enough, shall we call it, that you could get your kids involved with cooking this bunch of stuff. So we've got two parts to this. The first is the fruit part, which is 4 cups of blueberries. In this case, I'm using frozen blueberries, either frozen or fresh. It doesn't matter because they are going to get cooked down a little bit. You've got half a cup of white sugar, you've got cinnamon, and we're going to put a little bit of lemon juice in this. Both the lemon juice and the cinnamon are optional depending on your individual tastes. I kind of get the impression it depends on where you are from in the Maritimes, which one of these things you're going to put into the mix. And then the other part is what we use for the actual dumpling. So we've got all-purpose flour, baking powder, another half a cup of sugar, milk, eggs, and butter. And in this case, I've actually measured out the butter as opposed to cutting it off the block, just because the block that I had was kind of lopsided, so I couldn't be accurate with my measurement just by cutting it out. And a little bit of salt in the biscuit part of this. And so we start with the blueberries. So we're going to move over to the stove and get that simmering away to start with. Okay, so we've got a close-up of our pot here. We're going to put that on kind of just slightly over the medium heat. We're going to add in all of our blueberries. Now, if this was there we go. If this was fresh blueberries we were using instead of the frozen blueberries, we would put about 1/4 cup of water in with that. But because the frozen blueberries will release the moisture a little bit quicker, we don't need to do that. The only reason you do it with the fresh blueberries is otherwise they would stick to the bottom. Then we're going to take half of a cup of sugar. And we're going to take half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And it calls for the juice of half of a lemon. I don't have any fresh lemon in my stove or my refrigerator right at the moment, or on my countertop for that matter. So I'm just going to take a tablespoon of this bottled lemon juice and add that in. And then we'll just get a spatula and stir that up a little bit. And you can see already that there's moisture coming out of those berries, and that will be enough. We'll just stir those up every once in a while until we get a nice bubbly mixture. Anytime you're doing something that's a cobbler or anything that involves dumplings, it's really important to have the mixture that's on the bottom bubbling hot to start with. If we were to just take those dumplings and drop them in on top of the cold berries, what would happen is the top of the dumplings would cook first, but the bottoms would still be raw because they were waiting to catch up with the heat on the blueberries. So we'll let that simmer for a little bit and we'll get back to working on our dumplings. All right, so here we go with our dumpling mixture. We've got the 2 cups of flour in here. We're going to add about half a cup of white sugar into this and a tablespoon of baking powder. And silly me, I went and got my tablespoon wet. So I'm going to have to put in 3 teaspoons, which is the equivalent of a tablespoon, but if I tried to use the wet measuring spoon, it would gum up to the bottom and wouldn't measure accurately. One thing I noticed when I was looking up variations of blueberry grunt was there was quite difference in the amount of baking powder that was put into them and also the amount of sugar that was put into them. But I've tried actually a couple of these before we got that down to filming, and the tablespoon of baking powder and just the half a cup of sugar was about right. Some of them had as much as a cup of sugar, and I found those a little bit too sweet. It was a little overwhelming because the berries themselves are quite sweet. Okay, so I added a little bit of salt there. Now we're going to take the butter, and this is similar to when we were putting the lard into the pastry dough that we had for the pumpkin pie, which was last episode that we did. And that we take this nice clean hands, I just did wash them. We're going to take this and start mixing the butter in with the flour exactly the same way, just kind of pinching it together. If you want to use pastry knives or regular knives or pastry cutter, I guess they call them, that's at your discretion, but this is the system that I found works for me. And all the many times that I've worked it, this is where I feel like I've got the most control over how the fat and the flour is being incorporated. So the same thing, pinch it all together, and when it starts getting in smaller bits, start rubbing it together. And you'll see that this is actually much finer than what the pastry was, and that's because there's less fat to flour ratio, so it's definitely drier. And we also have, it's a little stickier too because we've got the sugar incorporated in there too. So now we've got 2/3 of a cup of milk here, and I'm going to take my egg and I'm just going to add it into the milk, so we're putting everything in all together. Now, as long as the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients aren't mixed together, you can do this part as far ahead as you want. You don't want to do it too far ahead because as soon as this liquid hits the dry mixture, the baking powder will immediately start to work. And we want that the baking powder working while it's cooking so that it fluffs up quite quickly. But I'm just looking over my shoulder at the blueberries, and they seem to be simmering reasonably quickly, so I think we're safe to put the mixture in. And we're just going to dump it all together. And this is much wetter than the pie crust was, so we're not going to have to get in with our hands. All I'm doing is I'm just stirring it up. A fork seems to work the best for this. We could have mixed the egg a little bit into the milk, but this is still working. The advantage to mixing it in with the milk is you know that you've got the yolk and the white evenly distributed throughout your moisture. But there we go. We've got a nice moist dough, and scrape off our fork because we're not going to need that again. And that's ready to go for our doughboys, as they're called. And now let's switch back over to the blueberries. Okay, so here you can see our blueberries are simmering very well. We got lots of bubbles happening in there. And that's how that's basically all we have to do is just straight up blueberries, sugar, lemon juice, and cinnamon simmering away. Now, you'll notice that I have this in a fairly deep pot. You really only need to have this in a deep frying pan, like a cast iron frying pan is probably what it was traditionally made in. But one of the key things about this is we're going to be steaming those doughboys, so we want to have a really tight fitting lid. And this is the pot that I have that is best for having a tight fitting lid. This isn't the kind of situation where we can just take any old frying pan and put some tin foil on the top, because we want to keep all of that steam in to help with our cooking. So now we've got our dough here, and a good ice cream scoop is probably a good size portion for these. Now we're just taking that and scooping them in on top of the blueberries. And I think we're probably going to get maybe 8 out of this mix. Maybe only 7, I'm not sure. Oh, how about we're going to get 6 in a bit. And I'll just make sure that those are separated a bit. And one of these is going to end up with a little bit of blueberry juice on it because I'm using the same spatula. But that's okay, because by the time this is all finished bubbling up together, there is going to be blueberry juice all over everything. All right, squeak one more in there. And then we're going to put our nice tight fitting lid on this. I'll put the temperature down to just a little below medium so it continues to simmer but without burning on the bottom. And then this is the really important part. The really important part of this is that we do not open that lid. No matter how tempting it is, we want to keep that steam in there. And we want to cook that for, I believe it is 10 minutes. No, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So I'm going to put my timer on for 15 minutes. And while we're doing that, I'm also going to start preheating my oven to 400 degrees. This is optional, but if when this is all done after the doughboys are cooked, if we pop it into a hot oven for just about 5 minutes, that will brown them a little bit. Like I said, totally optional, but we'll give that a whirl. You'll get to see what both options are like. There we go. So now we just patiently wait for our 15 minutes, but what modern technology, we will fast forward through this part. All right, so our timer is just about ready to go off for the 18 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. And I'm going to be very quiet for a minute. I'm going to let you hear the grunting noise here. And of course my timer goes off just in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to try again. I'm going to be very quiet and let you listen to the grunting noise that this is making. Now, hopefully that showed up okay on the mic. Now, as I always say, it's too bad we don't have a way for you to be able to smell this, but trust me, it does smell fabulous. And once again, that top is very hot. So now that our 15 minutes is up, I'm going to take my pot holder on this hot lid, and here we go. There we go. So those tiny little dollops, that ice cream scoop size that I put in, are nice and big. I'm going to turn off that burner. And just to show you, this is the ice cream scoop that we use to put that in. So you can tell that they're quite a bit bigger. They're speckled with blueberry juice. And even the blueberry mixture itself is quite a bit thicker because the moisture has absorbed up into the doughboys. So at this point, the oven is at 400 degrees. So we're just going to pop this in the oven and give it about 5 minutes maybe in the oven, and let that the tops of these brown up a little bit. Here's our oven open up. Pop that in. And I'm just going to set the timer for about 5 minutes, I think. There we go. Okay, so there is our 5 minutes of browning time, and let's just see how she looks. Oh yeah, we got a little bit more substance to the top there now, and I think that's probably going to do. You could do it a little bit more if you wanted, but I think that is sufficient for me. And say, okay, so now things have settled down just a little bit, and we're going to take out a spoonful of our doughboy and some of that beautiful blueberries on top. Now they do suggest either whipped cream or ice cream with this. Personally, I think it is better with ice cream because, as you can see, this is extremely hot. And if you got some nice cold ice cream with that, it's kind of like having a hot fudge sundae where you've got the hot blueberries and the cold ice cream. And it's a wonderful, wonderful combination. So now, where did I put the ice cream? So, thank you for joining us again on Hill's Top Stovetop, where we've made beautiful blueberry grunt. And thank you very much to Marilyn and Peter for suggesting this. If any of you have other dishes that you would like to see demonstrated, feel free to add something in the comments section. And also, if you're enjoying this series, we hope that you will like and subscribe. That's what keeps us going on the YouTube channel and lets us know that you're interested. So our next episode coming up after this is going to be turkey and dumplings. So we're going to use a similar technique that we did for making these doughboys, except we're putting it in a savory dish. And as I promised, it's a great way to use up some leftovers from that Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. So we look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye now.